I'm Diego Sanchez, COO of HousingWire, and this is 10-Minute Talks. My guest today is Lisa Sturtevant, Chief Economist at Bright MLS. Lisa, welcome to 10-Minute Talks.
Hey, Diego, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you on. Before we dive in, could you give a 30-second introduction of yourself and of Bright MLS?
Yeah, absolutely. I currently serve as Chief Economist at Bright MLS. Bright is one of the largest multiple listing services in the country. We cover an area from New Jersey down to Virginia, 6 states in the District of Columbia, and the source of listing information for more than 100,000 real estate agents across the region. And in my capacity, I get a chance to look at a lot of listing data, a lot of housing market data, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you about where the market might be headed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. I love your commentary on LinkedIn. I think it's really insightful. And I'd love to get your thoughts on a battle that we have going at HousingWire between our editor-in-chief, Sarah Wheeler, and our lead analyst, Logan Mohtashami. Sarah thinks that there's a mortgage rate lockdown, and Logan doesn't. Where do you fall in this debate?
Oh, putting me right in the middle of
Right in the
two
middle.
very smart people. I do believe that while we have seen mortgage rates rise faster than they have, in decades, 14 million people refinanced a home, millions more purchased a home, and are holding on to very low rates, which is a disincentive to sell your home. I do believe the rate lock phenomenon is a little overstated. So I think I'm leaning towards Logan's side of the argument here. And the rationale in my mind is, look, if folks are holding on to their existing low mortgage and not selling their home, they're not adding that home to the inventory, that surely is locking down supply, but it's also locking down demand, right? Because then you don't have that buyer on the market. So the extent to which the mortgage rate environment is keeping people from listing second homes, listing homes that they don't currently live in, or listing a home that they're not then going to turn around and buy a home, there's a rate lock phenomenon on the fringes, but I think there's been sort of a structural supply deficit for a long time, and this is just exacerbating it on the fringes, is my take.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that supply issue. Do you think are the factors beyond a potential mortgage rate lockdown that are leading to such low supply nationwide?
Yeah, so I think there's two main factors. I think the first has been, we talk about a lot. There's been a dearth of new construction over the last couple of decades. We're underbuilt by some 3 to 5 million units, depending on who you track. So that lack of new building has been a constraint on supply. But the other thing that I don't think gets as talked about as much, and is really sort of where I spend a lot of time thinking, is just the demographic factors that are driving inventory to go lower. We have this huge population of baby boomers who frankly have been staying in their homes longer than prior generations. And they're doing it for a variety of reasons. They don't have anywhere to downsize to, maybe, or we've seen more young adults move back home. So they're staying put to be a place for those young adults to move back home. They're staying in the labor force longer. So for all sorts of reasons, we're seeing that inventory has actually been declining for the last 5-7 years. And a lot of that has been due to people simply staying in their homes longer. It used to be on average, we stayed in our homes 7 years, and now it's 13. And that just will keep inventory from coming onto the market and will keep less volatility in the market.
So let's talk about two of those issues in a little bit more detail. So you talked about new home supply. And to me, there should be a profit motive for builders to fill in that new home supply. What do you think is preventing the builders from making up for that gap?
Yeah. So, right. There is the reason we don't have enough homes being built is not because builders don't want to build them. That's for sure. The primary constraints have changed over time, right? We've seen during the pandemic, supply chain issues were a problem. Over the last decade, labor has really been a problem as there's been fewer workers in the construction industry. But if you ask home builders, and in my experience as well, the primary obstacle to building new homes comes down to local regulations that prohibit the building of new homes. And so if there was any policy that you could think of that would help expand the supply of housing, it would be changing regulations at the local level to allow more housing to be built in a more straightforward, more streamlined process. And I'm sure you've seen, and your listeners have seen, the NAHB study that says that about 30% of the cost of building a new home is related to local and state regulation. And so if you want to point to one obstacle to why we're not building more housing, I would place most of the issue there.
So we can't really do anything about demographics, at least in the current moment, right? Like the demographics are set in place a generation ago or more when people have all the babies. But we,
Right.
perhaps there are some things that we can do about, around relief on mortgage rates and home prices, that have to do with
Hmm.
supply and other issues. When do you think we'll
Hmm.
start seeing some relief from this catch 22 that we're in of like high mortgage rates and low affordability, but continuing increases in home prices?
Yeah. So I look, I'm an optimist in general, but I also want to be realistic, and I do think that we're going to be in a very low inventory, low affordability environment really for several years. I don't think this is a turnaround that happens quickly. I think the structural challenges to supply are really deep and really long. And I do, you mentioned demographics, and I do think it will take demographics for us to shift into a market where there's a better balance between buyers and sellers. I think the market of the 2030s, which is a crazy phrase to even say, I think the market of the 2030s is going to feel very different than the market we have now. But barring some, I don't know, like unlikely legislation related to allowing assumable mortgages or some major local regulation changes that significantly increase supply in the short term, I do think it's going to be a low inventory, low affordability challenge here for the next few years.
So we have 7 years until the 2030s. In the meantime, we have real estate professionals and mortgage professionals who need to grow their business and win market share in this current low supply environment, which it sounds like you think is going to
Yeah.
last for a couple more years. What advice are you giving to the realtors that are members of
Yeah.
Bright MLS or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's during the pandemic, the housing market was so crazy. Real estate agents were working 24/7. There was no seasonality in the housing market. You sort of just go, go, go. And what we're finding now is in these more challenging conditions is that having to demonstrate the value, given the opportunity to demonstrate the value that the real estate agent brings to the transaction is even more important now than it's ever been. And what I mean by that is you think about a first time home buyer who's trying to get in the market now with elevated home prices, high mortgage rates. They're looking for a professional who can help them think through strategies, whether it's a mortgage lender or whether it's a real estate agent. We're seeing more and more first time buyers who are buying homes with their parents, for example. That's a different kind of transaction that needs people who can help navigate the unusual waters to getting to that. We're seeing that buyers are looking for a property that they can buy that can have a rental income component to it. So you need to work with a professional who understands local laws about whether you'll be able to rent your property out as an Airbnb. So I think that we've been seeing new models of homeownership, whether it's fractional homeownership or allowing more accessory units to be built on a property where there's a single family house to allow multi-generational living. So I think we're going to be in this age of creative home buying in terms of finding ways to navigate outside the typical lane.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it's sort of like what is happening in media where there's riches in the niches is an expression that's commonly used.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like,
Uh-huh.
niche home buying, there's riches in becoming an expert in these different niches of home buying.
I think that's right, and I do think that it is understanding all of us in the real estate industry, understanding that we're not going to go back to where we were prior to the pandemic. The housing market, I think, has been fundamentally changed, at least for the near term. We just released a study at Bright that looks at some of the ways the COVID-19 pandemic has created a long-lasting impact on the housing market, and we may need to think about doing business differently as we remain in this market with very low inventory, very difficult affordability challenges.
Well, Lisa, it has been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I would love to have more in the future. Great to catch up today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of 10 Minute Talks. If you want to stay up to date on all things housing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and drop a like and a comment below if you enjoyed this video.